Hello, and welcome to the podcast Green Business with Impact. Thank you for listening and tuning in today. Today's theme is on the connection between sustainability and attracting funding, because growing a company obviously needs investment, and quite often more than you can just get together and foster on your own. So you will be looking into finding investors in some form or shape. And clearly, there is a focus in the investor community on sustainability these days, especially across Europe, as I understand it or see it, both because the sort of traditional investors are, not the least pushed by European regulation, are focusing in on assessing their portfolio and how sustainable that is. But we're also seeing an increasing numbers of the impact investors, that community is growing. So I hear a lot of people saying that it's hard, and I don't know how many times I've had people saying that it's difficult to attract investments for sustainability because obvious sometimes it's like investors perhaps do not understand it or anything. So I figured it'd be interesting to cast a bit of light on that. And then luckily I know James Church, who's with me here today. Thank you so much for joining me, James.
Thanks for having me.
Because James is just the right person to have in for such a discussion. James, you're the author of the international best-selling book Investable Entrepreneur, and then co-founder of the multi-award winning investment readiness agency called Robot Mascot that you created with your fellow partner there, Nick Rouston. And I've really been looking forward to this because, as I said, I hear that there are a lot of people that are struggling with this theme. So James, why don't you sort of, just for setting the scene, let us know how important would you say it is to be investable or investable ready as a company with growth ambitions in the world today?
Yeah, I mean, I think many companies need to be investor ready, as I would say, ready to pitch. Finance seems to be a key part of all business growth now. We're sort of gone are the days where people are really sort of bootstrapping, sort of building as they go, and there's an ambition for lots of founders and investors to get places much quicker and to leverage capital and finance to do so. We've obviously seen a huge boom in that over the last sort of decade or more, last couple of decades. So yeah, being investor ready, making sure that you're always in a position to go and leverage capital, whether that be equity investment or some other form of capital, quite honestly, is a really key part of being an entrepreneur, being a business owner. But yeah, more and more early stage ideas are leveraging capital to kind of get their idea off the ground, because these ideas, these game-changing, world-beating ideas, are costing more than ever to get started, let alone build and scale. So even just to test a proof of concept is costing way more than perhaps these sorts of things did historically. If we think about the tech revolution of the early 2000s, it was pretty amazing, the dot-com boom, but we were building e-commerce websites, which today just seems very, very simple technology, right? So comparatively, the technology's moved on, but so has the cost of developing that new IP. So it goes.
Is that what you see, by the way? Because you could also hear the other, look at it the other way around, that the tools are more abundant than ever, and you can build easily and simple, and so you can get there at least from idea to perhaps only prototype, I don't know, but quite cheap. But what you're saying is that you actually, it's more costly to develop. But
well, it depends. There's a lot
is that a
of
sector
variables,
thing,
right?
or
Yeah, it depends on the sector, depends on what you're building, depends on what you're improving upon, and what the baseline is. So if you're building fintech right now, that's a very advanced, in terms of technology and financial technology, that's in a very advanced position. We're on sort of fintech 3.0, if not fintech 4.0. We've gone from kind of consumer technology to kind of B2B technology, and now we're looking at, it's much more about real kind of enterprise kind of back end systems that are much more difficult to fix and more costly to kind of bring together.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Whereas something a bit more a newer market might be in that position where it's easier. But yeah, the technologies are there. but it depends if you can access them. So not every founder is technical, not every founder can access, even
No.
use the tools that are available. And the cost of a development team has gone through the roof because of the amount of investment into technology. For example, the cost of a middleweight engineer or developer to come and work on your piece of technology is probably starting at 100K a year now versus maybe 40, 50K a year a few years ago. So they're in demand. There's not enough of that resource. So the cost of hiring the team to build it has gone up. So there's all of these kind of factors
Makes
at play
sense.
that I think leads me to the conclusion that it, from my experience anyway, it appears for most businesses to cost more to get your early stage development done than it did perhaps a decade ago.
And especially as you say, perhaps at the speed, right? So I guess also the ones that actually come working with you very much are in a hurry, and there it makes sense, of course, that
Speed costs money,
you can't just say, okay, yeah, exactly, right. It's not for free to speed up.
That's
so,
it. And
okay,
the UK, particularly with the government legislation around these tax incentives to invest, and they've increased the threshold for early stage kind of tax incentives by quite a considerable amount, to reflect the fact that it costs more to get these ideas off the ground than it did a decade ago. That's my understanding.
Makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. Okay, I mean, very often I mainly work with companies that want to transition their company into, I guess we could call it like a force for good, as sort of an overarching theme for it, in whatever area they choose to have their heart, and where they see the opportunity for them. Could you share some example of businesses that you come across, perhaps some of your clients or somebody you read about, that that were really on a forceful journey to have some sort of bigger impact on the world, that has utilized that part of where it has helped them to get access to capital in some form?
Yeah, there's so many, but the one that's just sort of sprung to mind is a client we were working with probably sort of 18, 24 months ago. They were a sustainable energy sustainable energy company, but they were also having a human impact on the world. So they had created kind of these power banks that were the size of shipping containers, and they were deploying them in rural Africa where they had no power. They were traveling 50 miles to go fill up gas bottles, and that's the only power they had. And they were utilizing the fields around them to lay solar panels, and this was charging up this infrastructure that was the size of a shipping container, and people could go in and kind of fill up their batteries. They could power, they could create a grid for these rural communities in Africa, completely changing the impact of the people that lived there, but also the environmental impact of the energy that was being consumed. There was no longer a 50-mile journey there and back to go and pick up more bottles of fossil fuel. So you weren't using fossil fuel to go and pick up fossil fuel to bring back and consume in the village. So there was a massive environmental impact. There was obviously a human impact because they had reliable energy that they could use much more freely. It meant the hospital never ran out of power. All of those sorts of things were happening. So yeah, that's one example of for me a true impact company that they've got a very clear commercial business model. Financially, this was an incredible commercial model, but it had a huge impact, and that's what investors for me are looking for. Is yes, they're willing to talk to any impact investor and they'll say, yeah, look, we're willing to take a hit on the commercial returns because of the good that it's doing for the planet. But in the back of their head, and they're getting so many opportunities sent their way, that it's very, unless you're able to deliver the same kind of commercial returns as any other business, plus you have that impact, it's very difficult, I think, to cut through, because they want to do good, but ultimately they're doing this. They're not philanthropists; they're investors. They're doing this
No,
to
of course not. And what I like about the model or the company you explained there is, right, and I think that's what you should use. How sustainability should be used as a tool. it's to make, smarter and better solutions, right? And you painted the picture quite clearly that, avoid having to spend time and money and emissions on traveling 50 miles to get
Mhm.
it and get back in, and it's noisy, it's polluting, it offers a lot of problems, and it's inconsistent and all of that, right? And then here's a model where it's stable, it's cheaper, it's less fluctuating, it's safer, it
Yeah.
saves time, it has lesser environmental impact, so obviously a better solution. And I think that's what we are seeing, that when you solve meaningful problems in a new and smarter and better way, then you get better
Mhm.
solutions that then are also better from a sustainability point of view. But the selling point is not the sustainability; it's the smarter solution, right? Um, but how do you
That's it.
say for this company, how have they leveraged that towards the investor community? Practical steps. What
Yeah,
were
I
they
mean,
doing? How is there a story they're coming out with, or
it's
how
the
do they
yeah,
sort of leverage the power of the
that's it.
effort?
It's down to the storytelling. So, commercially, this business was as good as any other in terms of the returns, in terms of the growth potential. All of those
Mhm.
things were on par with any kind of tech investment you might want to make, whether sustainable or not, impact driven or not. And that's the first key for me, is to make sure the business model stacks up minus any impact, because then you're on a par with everybody else, and your
Mm.
impact becomes not a
Yeah,
substitute for commercial success. It
it's a
becomes
bonus.
the
Yeah,
bonus. So we're going,
yeah,
okay, I've whittled my potential investments down to these two companies. They're both going to deliver me similar returns. The teams are both awesome. The development, the opportunity is incredible with both. One of them is going to have this environmental, social impact. The other one doesn't. They're going to naturally, I think, in today's world, investors, whether quote unquote impact investors or not,
mm.
are going to lean towards the one that gives them a really decent story to tell to fellow investors and to their peers that they've invested in this business, and here's the human story behind it that they can go and
Yeah,
tell and boast about to their
yeah. Because
investors.
we all humans, right? Right. So
Yeah.
even
So
though
so
you
the
might be an investment banker in a company or whatever, it's still a bunch of people under the
yeah.
same roof.
Well,
At the end of the
imagine
day,
you're
it's a
in
person
this
thing, right?
investment. Yeah, yeah. Imagine you're this investment banker, and you're going for drinks with some colleagues after work, and you can either say, I've gone and invested in this oil company that's going to make me loads of money, and everyone's going, oh, that sounds a bit horrible. That's not. Or you can go and say, I've invested in this company that's providing green electricity to both energy companies. One's got a human story where you can talk about how it's going to change the lives of these
Mm.
individuals and deliver me the whatever X return I'm hoping for. It just makes you feel a better individual for making that choice to invest, and you go and
Mm.
tell everyone about it in a very different way. So it's the bonus, it's kind of the icing on the cake. And where people fail is where they don't have an impact driven business and they try and pitch it like one, and really they're
Mm.
talking about social corporate responsibility, and they say 1% of profits
Yeah.
goes to charity or whatever, and that's great, right? We shouldn't knock companies trying to do that, but to try and position that to impact investors or as an impact investment is not really what what it's about,
No.
right? It's about
No.
having a
And
commercial
I mean,
model.
back to your business case, it just basically mean, okay, so if I'm looking at this again up against an alternative, it just means that 1% of the profit will go out for nothing,
Mm,
uh, from an investor's point of view, other than that sort of feeling of doing something good. But it
yeah,
will ultimately mean, if they are comparable, that at the end of the day, it will have a poor result because it's not
yeah,
tied in the way you do business. It's just live
yeah,
somewhere. So
yeah.
like
So
the old way, right? Yeah.
that's it. So it's get that commercial model nailed first. It's as good as any other commercial model, and then tell the story around the impact, and
Mm.
talk about it in real terms. Again, thinking about the investor's kind of ego and being able to say, sort of, is there a few things they could go and tell someone about this investment they've made? Imagine what those things would be. So it would be the
Mm.
personal story of, here's Abuya, and she has to travel 50 miles to go and tell that personal story of that sort of trouble and strife, and how this solution is going to change that in a commercial and profitable way. But also looking longer term and going, when at scale, if we achieve our objectives, by the time in 5 years' time, we'll have impacted X number of communities, would have reduced carbon emissions by Y, some tangible long-term goals of not just financial objectives for the company, but also those impact metrics that they can get their teeth into and say, wow, we're going to. So to take this as another example away from energy, because I think energy is an obvious one, we worked with a company called Behind Bras, which was a female-led brand for using the production of lingerie to retrain female convicts with a new skill for life. They could be a seamstress. They could leave prison, be a seamstress, and they were making female underwear.
Lovely name for the company.
Yeah,
with
Behind
that
Bras.
setup.
That's the name, right? And they were creating. They both had sort of an educational element that trained these individuals and gave them job skills and opportunities and reduced reoffending rates. But on the other hand, had a commercial model where they sold these garments into retail. And the way that was pitched is the story of the inmates and the reoffending rates and how we need to cut that, but also some clear objectives of how much it would save the government in terms of prison places. It costs 30 grand a year to look after one inmate. And if we can take X a year by year 5 and reduce the reoffending rate by Y, we'll have saved the government this much capital. And you've then got these little impact narratives of not just how you've changed lives, but how you've made a meaningful and measurable difference to society or the environment or whatever it may be. So yeah, that's the way we would do it, is business case strong, but lead with that emotional and emotive story that we can all get behind, and then back it up with some statistics around what would actually be achieved beyond those individual stories in terms of the data.
It's interesting, James, because it seems like the way you've been explaining it here today is like, what really makes the difference at the end of the day is the narrative, right? So if you have two business cases that are more or less comparable, investor cases that are more or less comparable, then it's the narrative that makes all the difference. So would that mean that we could say that, being a force for good in whatever area, social, environmental, or both, or whatever, but being that sort of force for good, is that kind of like a superpower to attract investment in today's world? Or
I think so. Providing, like I say, providing you're not using it as a substitute for good, sound commercial business modeling. But if it's in addition to a sound business model, then it's a superpower. Mm-hmm. If there'll be people listening to this who are like, oh, that's great, but we're trying to make an impact, and because we're trying to make an impact, we just can't be as commercially viable as company X, and that's fine, right? And you can still use that impact as a superpower, but it's going to be slightly tougher because you're going to have the investors now going, do I go with money or impact? And what you tend to find is most will lean towards the money because they're not philanthropists.
Yeah.
But equally, one in typically most angel investors I speak to would say that that's a key differentiator, and also they would kind of make a commitment to themselves personally that 1 in every 10 investments they make has to be an impact driven business, and it's less about, we take the commercial out of it, and I want to invest in something that's going to do good.
They want to have the big impact.
It's still, whichever way you look at it, it's a superpower. It becomes more of a superpower if your commercial model is and the business case is as exciting commercially as any other business. But yeah, absolutely a massive superpower in today's world, because I think it's on everyone's mind how we solve this stuff through, governments aren't solving this stuff very well, so it comes down to the private sector to allow us to hit these kind of global targets we've set ourselves. So
get us out of the mess that we have created for ourselves. So So what would be, say we have listeners here that are sitting and thinking, okay, this is interesting. We are already really working on integrating sustainability in some form into our business, and we still have a strong business and all that, but we need to go out and attract some investments. What's sort of the steps? How do you do? What's the short version of what to do? I'm sure you have
Yeah,
some sort of model or steps that you take
yeah.
people through. So,
But there's
help us here.
four.
What do we need to do? Let's just say we're a company. We're producing office furnitures. We are 50 people, and we have found a solid way where we want to. The way we produce are carbon positive, and we have a social side to it too, or whatever, right? So
Hmm.
it's they're in the realm of great climate. Let's just say
Yeah.
that that's their focus, right? So what do we do? How do we go from here? I'm the
So,
CEO. What do I do?
so we can break this down into two areas, and I call them the two investment killers. So the first investment killer is kind of what we've talked about, the communication, the storytelling, the how do you get your business case and your concept across to an investor in a way that makes them excited by the vision, but also by the commercial model. So we need to solve that first. We need to have something to communicate to investors that's going to engage and inspire them and make them want to kind of learn more about the journey. And the way we do that is across something called the fundraising assets. And there's three critical fundraising assets you would need to produce to put this in place. The first will be the business plan that outlines that full business case that I talked about, showing that it's commercially viable, it's going to generate revenues, it's going to generate returns, it's on par commercially with any other business that you may want to invest in. So if in this furniture company's case, we're clearly not going to be comparing ourselves to making an investment in some kind of high scale financial technology, but compared to other furniture manufacturers, you have a really solid, if not better, business model and business case than a competitor might. Then we need to create the second critical fundraising asset, which would be the financial projections. So how does this plan map out financially for me as an investor? What are the short-term costs involved in how's my funding being used in the short term to achieve some key strategic objectives? And then in the longer term, how does the business scale up? At what speed does the founder believe the business can scale up? And do I, as an investor, believe that to be realistic and but also ambitious? But
Yeah,
can we show
yeah,
growth? Can we show potential? What are our ambitions? Where do we think this company could get to? And would it deliver me the types of returns I'm looking for? And then the final and third critical fundraising asset is, of course, the pitch itself. You've got to go out and pitch this to investors. And that's the storytelling. That's where we kind of sell in the vision, the value proposition, the impact story in this case. And then once they're hooked with that value proposition and they really understand the impact, and you've got that kind of emotional connection with the investors, it's then kind of briefly outlining the logical argument of the commercial model and the financial plan, which you can then back up with the business plan and the financials in later conversations. So that's your kind of preparation phase. That allows you to
okay.
communicate your
Hmm.
business proposition in both a commercial and impact driven narrative to investors. And the second investment killer is being able to actually find investors to pitch to. Very few founders have a ready-made
Makes sense.
network of
Yeah,
high net worth individuals lining up to invest in their business. So the second thing you need to do is you're prepared, you've got everything you want to say, you know exactly how you need to say it, but you need to find the investors to say it to. So that would be the next sort of
mm,
problem to solve, the second investment killer and the next step in the process. And for that, it's a case of investor targeting, mapping out all of the potential investors and high net worth individuals that may be interested in what you're doing. They're kind of associated with your industry. They're either, in this case, they do impact investing, they're in B2C investments. If it's a furniture company that we're talking about here, they've got they've got history and connections within the retail, manufacturing, furniture kind of space. They're people who have made their wealth in and around themes of what you do, and are
mm,
probably most likely to be interested in this proposition. And then it's a case of the hard slog of outreach, just kind of contacting as many
yeah,
people as you can, and
yeah,
kind of not take no for an answer. You know, we're talking hundreds, if not thousands of connections to get kind of a critical mass of investors and high net worths to pitch to. And obviously that changes as you
So it's
go.
kind of like one to 1,000 or so. And I mean, is that
Yeah,
the ratio of what you are looking at for to actually find enough people that want to truly
it
listen to what you
depends.
say, and out of those, they will actually be ready
Yeah,
to invest in you?
it depends on so many factors, so as a general rule of thumb, I say for every 50 investors you reach out to, you might expect 10 to view your pitch. Of those 10, 2 might express some level of interest, and of those 2, 1 might end up investing. So we've got the 50, 10,
Okay.
2, 1 rule. That is so broad, because if I'm pitching a new vodka brand, everyone understands a vodka brand. We all know what vodka is. Most of us probably drink it or have drank it at some point. And we understand it, and we understand that people will buy it if it's a really cool brand. Whereas if I've got a really complicated piece of deep tech, there's only a small number of people who would understand that. So you'd expect with your outreach a lower conversion rate, perhaps, in kind of the initial interest, than those with a vodka brand. But equally, you might expect a slightly better conversion rate later down in the funnel, because it's so specialist, it's so niche. You're really talking to experts in your space rather than something more broad, where anyone with a bit of cash could go and invest in a vodka brand without really much thought or expertise needed to do so. So it changes based on the type of business and the business model. But that's a very broad, and also the stage of development. The earlier stage you are, the more conversations you're going to need to have. The later stage you are, let's say you're already doing $1 million or $2 million in revenue, and you're looking for 5 million to kind of triple your revenue over the next 12 to 18 months. You're talking to VC firms. There's less venture capital firms than angels, so you're naturally going to be talking to maybe 100, 200 VC firms to find your investment, rather than hundreds, thousands of high net worths for your sort of early stage round.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's all very much.
I was kind of curious to hear, because again, my experience is that a lot of people in the finance sector, sort of, for lack of a better word, for all of it, understand sustainability as a business driver, but clearly see that as that sort of additional cost or a choice between, doing good business wise and doing good for the world. It can't be both, and all of that. So is it your experience that that's changing? And one thing is the impact investors, who obviously get it because that's their thing and they're investors, so they're it. But if we take them aside and look at the rest of the community, are they getting better at understanding the opportunity side and not being, I guess you could say, scared by it, and enough to really start digging with their analysis and capacities to understand the business case in it?
Yeah, and again, we're going to talk on very broad strokes, but if we're talking about a fund, like a VC fund, then they're going to have a very clear MO, and they are a business like any other, and they have customers, which are pension funds or whoever, high net worths, perhaps family offices, who have institutional investors that have put their money into the VC fund on the promise that it's going to get a 3x return. And then the VCs play a high risk game of going, I'm going to use this pot of cash that we've got from institutional investors. We've promised them a 3x return. We're going to gamble that essentially on 100 different businesses. And we know that 97% of those businesses will fail. A couple of percent will deliver a return, like a break even or a modest small 1, 2, 3x return. And then there'll be one, and this is called the VC power law if anyone wants to Google it, but there'll be one shining star in those 100 companies that will be the unicorn billion-dollar business, and it will deliver us 150, 200 times return on investment. And that return will pay back all of the money lost on the other ventures and give us enough capital to deliver the 3x return we promised our clients. So it's like a really high risk game of roulette that these guys are playing. So when you think about it from their perspective, they've promised these people a 3x return. They know that there's no guarantee and the value of your investment can go up and down and all of those usual things, but they need to deliver a 3x return for their clients. So if you're in that position, are you going to go with something that feels more like a sure thing commercially, or something that just does good for the planet? Unless their brief to their when they were pitching their business to their institutional investors, they were pitching themselves as an impact fund that said, we are going to,
that's
50%
different.
of our investments are going to be impact. And the institutional investors have agreed that that's something that they want to do for their own social corporate responsibility, and they want to be able to use that as a marketing tool. So with these funds, unless they're already designated to be an impact fund, they're only looking at the commercial returns, because they've got to deliver their clients a return. Now, if they can go back to their clients and say, look, we gave you a 3x return and we've also saved the planet as well, happy days. But they're not going to risk delivering that return.
No. And that, of course, makes a lot of sense. But what I was, I guess, looking for is is it your experience that they are growing their capacity to understand it? Because, for years, I've worked with clients and seen examples around me of companies that create huge financial success of a product because they are thinking at it from a sustainability, a resource flow point of view, simply creating better and smarter solutions, just like the one you mentioned in the beginning, right? That the electrical solution and combination of battery storage and solar cells is just simply a better solution, right?
Yeah.
So, and that comes not just in the green tech sector, that could also be on any other given type of commodity that, we just thought of a smarter version, because looking at it from that sustainability point of view makes us see different things, right? It could be something along the lines where, it might be, it's more flexible and scalable because we designed it for disassembly, so we can use it and take it apart and upgrade it. So you can actually get a higher degree of flexibility than on your competitor's side, or it's easier to repair and maintain, or it can be upgraded to fix and match the needs you have, or whatever it is. So it's it's simply a better solution, right? But very often it's still different than the mainstream part, and it's that, I guess, risk averse to new stuff, right? Do you feel like they're starting to wrap their head around that perhaps this is actually really, really a great idea, even though it's green?
I don't think they're, if we take impact investors aside and we think about the rest, and we paint them with a broad brush, the reason they invest into early stage businesses is because they're not scared of innovation, right? They're doing this because of innovation, regardless of where that innovation comes from. So I think they're not going to be skeptics or skeptical of sustainability or impact. They're going to see it as a business benefit, both from an innovation perspective, but also a commercial perspective, in terms of it gives you another story to tell in your marketing that might just be enough to tip the balance. In the same way we just talked about it being a superpower in comparing which investment do I make, it also becomes a superpower in terms of a client deciding which solution to adopt. Go with the one, they're both the same, I'll go with the one that's got better green credentials. All of those things are going to come into play. I think it's the founder's job, though, to really not just assume that these investors will be able to see for themselves that because this is a innovative, impact-led business, it's having an impact on our margins because we're producing things more efficiently, which actually makes things more cost effective, which means we have more marketing budget, which means we can scale quicker, or whatever it may be. It's your job as a founder to paint that picture and kind of say, look, we've innovated on these things to make this impact, and the commercial result of that is a more efficient business that can scale quicker, that can adapt quicker, that can whatever the commercial benefits of that are, as well as the impact it generates, as well as the position it gives us in the market to attract this new wave, this new generation of consumers that have sustainability as one of their top priorities. Whatever the story is, it's your job as a founder to really paint the picture for investors so that they see that there's
so they are still coming from that sort of risk averse perspective, to new stuff they don't know. Obviously, that's a higher risk if you don't know exactly and don't understand exactly what you're stepping into. It's harder to assess whether or not you believe in it or not. So if I hear correctly, there is, there's room to tell the different story today, but it's up to you to be good enough of really spelling out why, this approach that we have had means like we have like a third of all moving parts compared to our competitors. So it's so much simpler and easier and faster for us to produce this. If we like, we can also say it's more sustainable, but it's actually simply smarter and cheaper. So that's the difference, rather than doing it the way everybody's been doing for the last 40, 50 years, right?
That's it.
Or whatever
That's
it is.
So it's always up to the founder. Remember that the investors are getting a huge amount of noise. They're seeing 10, 20, 50 pitch decks a week. VCs are investing in 1 in every 150 deals they see. Angels are making on average 2 investments a year and maybe seeing 500 pitch decks throughout a year. There's a lot of noise that you're competing up against. So the more clear you can be and more articulate you can be with your own communication, to leave no stone unturned, make it really clear and obvious, the superpower, as you say, that being an impact driven business, a sustainable business, brings beyond just the obvious, and look more at how that impacts through the business as well as in society and in the environment, and how that impact actually has a positive commercial effect. The better you can get at telling all of those stories, the more likely you are to raise investment. For sure. It becomes a no-brainer. Your job as a founder is to make it a no-brainer, that this is, you're looking to de-risk.
I like that way of putting it. But I think it's really interesting because, one of the things that I very often tell our clients, or when I'm speaking, or, in my book or anything, it's like, there are so many of the classical issues that most business leaders are facing, like cutting costs, increasing sales, increasing customer loyalty, attracting the better talent and maintaining them, increasing, how well functioning people are in work, and thereby productivity and innovation, and so on and so on and so on. You can boost that by becoming a force for good company. And thereby that's why you beat the competition, is simply because you get, better people delivering better products to more loyal fans. And obviously, and at the same time, you have some sort of positive impact on the world. That gives you the upper hand compared to people who's doing it like they used to do. And if they have some sort of sustainable green line, whatever, it's typically one with the 10 or 15% higher costs, right? And so that's a typical picture.
Here's a really obvious perhaps example of this, but and how you need to spell this out for investors, right? So let's just take a classic business to consumer product brand. They've decided they want to make sure their packaging is 100% recyclable and sustainable. Now, the natural assumption is that's going to be more expensive than traditional packaging, because that's got bigger cost-effective systems set up. They can do it at a bigger scale, and therefore it's going to be cheaper. Now, that may or may not be the case, but that will be probably the assumption. So, and it may well be that your sustainable packaging does cost a little bit more to be sustainable. However, if you look at kind of toilet rolls, for example, they reduced the size of the little tube in the middle. That then meant that a pack of toilet rolls was smaller, which meant they could then put more on a truck, which then meant their delivery and operational costs went down as a result of investing more in changing the packaging. So the packaging cost might have gone up. In this case, it went down, but the packaging cost may well go up, but it's more efficient. It's a better package. For whatever reason, and it creates more space on the lorries, which reduces the fuel and all of those sorts of things. That has both a cost and environment impact as a result of doing that. So just saying, oh, we're going to use sustainable packaging, thinking that everyone's going to go, oh, brilliant sustainability, and investors are going to go, oh, that sounds expensive. So if it is more expensive, you then need to explain the commercial benefit of that
value
through the internal operations of the business, as well as it's really important to me because this is going to be our positioning within the market. So we have to make sure that this stuff is watertight in terms of every piece of our product is sustainable. So yes, it may cost more to produce the sustainable packaging, but actually it reduces space, and therefore we can ship more for the same cost. And there's a
I
commercial
think
benefit.
it's really interesting because when I work with companies, one of the things that I almost always end up discussing with them or introducing as an approach and as a tool is, if we map out all the opportunities that they possibly could pursue, giving that they have whatever sort of mission and vision and goals they have ahead of you, then saying, what are the top 5 problems that you are facing? And what are the top 5 problems that your ideal clients are facing? And then let's have those potentially 10, or often fewer because some are overlapping, as a filter. And then let's take all the 50 ideas we got, push it through the filter, and what comes out in the end is, independently from a business point of view, valuable because they contribute to solving some of the biggest problems we have. And they are at the same time additionally value because it also contributes to that cause, whatever it is, that bigger impact that we're looking at. And it seems like that approach is really what you should just harness and make even more distilled and be even more clear about if you want to go to investors, because they will need the same story and explanation of the steps of why we're doing this actually is good. Is that correct? Do I understand you correct?
Yeah, they will. They'll need to know eventually. They'll need to know all of those things to make an informed decision on whether or not to invest. I'm not saying you should load your pitch and bamboozle them with all of this information to begin with, but you should expect to the obvious. If you're not talking to impact investors who are specifically all they look at is impact deals, and you're talking to a more generalist investor, you should expect those obvious questions of, well, hang on, aren't your margins going to be worse because you're using this type of packaging, which is going to be more expensive or whatever? You should expect those obvious questions, and you should have a really good and credible answer that is beyond, oh yeah, but our brand is that we're sustainable, so we have to use sustainable packaging. That's not a good, that's a nice thing to have as a vision for the company, but that's not a good commercial reason or commercial validation as to why.
There are very few people that are so brand dependent that alone can carry the weight of whatever it is you need to invest. Yeah.
As long as you've then got the commercial argument of, yes, it will cost more, but we believe it will give us an additional X share of the market because we've got research from consumers that suggests that this is a big decision-making factor, and in addition to that, these are the operational costs that will be reduced or whatever, then as long as you've got a good rationale behind it beyond but my product's sustainable, so it's got to be this, because that's a really bad argument to anyone, let alone an investor.
Exactly. Exactly. It's not an argument, actually. It's just a statement. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, I mentioned there in the beginning that from my chair, I see a movement in the sort of overall finance sector to take in sustainability and starting to understand it a bit. And again, as I said, a lot of it for the bigger traditional, everything from banks and different kind of sort of regular finance institutions, that they have to report and follow this European Union legislation. But what do you think is, where is the sort of finance sector, investor sector or industry? What kind of movement do you think we will be seeing over the next 18 to 24 months in terms of their engagement and interest and appetite to engage with sustainability in some form?
Yeah, I think it's only going to go up. It's been going up. It will continue to go up. There's more and more impact funds and impact investors than ever. As I say, more and more angel investors are sort of talking to me about having a consideration around the things that they do and the decision they make in making sure a certain percentage of their portfolio is doing some good to the planet or society, as well as delivering them a commercial return. So I think that's only going to become more and more important. And if we think about those VC funds that we talked about, they're servicing clients, and if there's a push down from these institutions where they want to be able to tell a story of we're a pension fund, but we're investing in sustainability. They want those stories to be able to tell for their own corporate social responsibility. So I think there'll be downward pressure onto VC funds to start having an impact fund alongside their standard fund or whatever it may be. I don't think it will become exclusively or one or the other. I think there'll be much more of a blended kind of, we have an impact fund, or we ring fence X% of our fund for impact investments. And as long as you meet these commercial criteria, you qualify. I think all of that is moving in the right direction as time goes on. But we have to remember that things in these sorts of institutions happen much than we would like. We can look across the board, whether that be impact and sustainability, or whether that be gender, or whether that be race, like all of these things going at a snail's pace compared to the speed at which society is moving, because of the nature of the beast. But yeah, there's definitely movement, and things are definitely getting.
But don't you think? I'm kind of sitting and watching and honestly wondering a bit, but thinking, soon they will have to connect the dots. But let's just say I lend you a significant, amount of money, whatever that is, in terms of your lending budget, your investments budget, over a 10-year or 8-year, 5-year something payback. That companies, again, as you say, the speed of change in society, if you are still performing the old-fashioned way of business, will you be equally successful 5 years, 8 years down the line? And thereby, can you deliver the kind of return to me that I am expecting? Or, so isn't the risk side of the old-fashioned way of doing business, doesn't it start to shout out to them that, it's a higher risk? It's, it's a family of the stranded assets that we have been seeing, the whole divestment part on traditional oil and gas and all of that.
So.
Are you starting to recognize that's kind of discussion is rising or not?
I would very much hope so. And I think these things definitely change quicker at an early stage with the sort of angels and early stage funds who are a bit close to the ground and less driven by sort of incumbent people who've been sort of doing this for 30 years and then have only known one way, or driven by old institutional models. Because you could equally say, I don't know what the data is around sustainability. As soon as you start getting data through that says they're more likely to generate a return, then obviously the market starts to move. But you could equally say, well, the data's been out for years now that female founding teams deliver twice the return of male founding teams. Yet females still only seem to get 1 to 2% of total investment worldwide.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, the data's there.
Point.
They're better. They're better than the blokes. Why are VCs not investing in the blokes, in the females? Why are they still continuing to invest in the blokes? And they're just stuck in their ways. There's this sort of inherent sort of prejudice, and you're always going to encounter that when you're something new and different. I think, we're comparing apples and oranges here a little bit, and I think it's a different story for sustainability. But I think the point stands of like the old way of doing. There's always going to be. I honestly think there's going to be funds. There'll be funds that shut down, funds that don't deliver returns because they've been unable to change, and then there'll be new funds that are having great success because they have seen this coming, and it'll be
they become really good at picking the right ones, the winners of all these
funds that
new
are more
wave
sustainability focused, created by a more millennial generation. So you've got to remember that millennials now are kind of at the peak of their spending power. They're the old boys of the future that are currently sitting there in the VC funds making all the decisions. Over the next few years, as you get the kind of the millennial generation into those more decision making powers within these funds, having the capital personally to become angel investors, for example, we're starting to see a younger and younger generation of angels, of people who have had successful commercial businesses in their 20s and they're sort of 35, 40 now, and they become angel investors. They have a very different idea of what, very much this sustainability and impact driven stance in terms of what they want to do with their capital than maybe a 70-year-old high net
Yeah.
worth.
Yeah, and where you believe the money is, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, just
So,
look around at the weather, at least here in Europe, but in all of the world. But just stay in our backyard over the this summer and this fall, and it's just keeps
yeah,
setting breaks every week or every month breaks some sort of previous record, right? And it
that's
gets
it.
clearer and clearer for everybody that we
Yeah,
are we are moving in the wrong direction, and thereby again everybody is looking for solutions that are at least as good from a product or solution point of view, and then good for the world.
yeah.
And when you do that, well,
And
everybody's looking for it.
yeah,
So,
much like
so
businesses, the big corporates are like trying to move and turn an oil tanker, and it takes ages to make
mm,
seemingly really small change. And for them, that's a big win in terms of their sustainable credibility. But it's taken years of internal fighting to get
mm,
that signed off because they're big oil tankers that need to turn. Whereas startups are nimble and quick, and they can change and they can adapt and they can grow and they can take on the next opportunities. It's exactly the same in the funding world. You've got these established VCs that have been doing it this way for the last 30, 40 years, and they're big oil tankers that need to change the way they're doing things in the hope that when they could just carry on playing with the old playbook and hope that works
yeah,
out. And then you've got new angels, new investors, new funds coming in that are kind of built by this younger generation who are nimble and quick and agile and able to kind of adapt to these sorts of conditions. So yeah, I don't know whether it's taking the fight to these established institutions or more kind of supporting the ones coming through with this new attitude. If I was an impact founder, I'd be looking for those new dynamic, exciting VC funds and trying to pitch to something that is sort of established and old school, and probably, unless they have a very clear
mm,
criteria to make sustainable led investments, you're probably going to be kind of constantly at a bit of a battle with them. Whereas I
yeah,
think the smaller, newer funds that are going to naturally have that and the younger, more sustainable based, sort of, they're just going to have it as part of their psyche. It's not even going to be
yeah.
a
Okay,
thing on
so
their
to
list of things they look for. It's
yeah,
just
it
going to
makes
be kind of
sense. Yeah,
something they think. Do you see what I mean? I think it's
yeah.
kind of, yeah, I think everyone's going to get there eventually. There's just some are going to take longer than others, and it's
Yeah,
all
yeah, and some are not going to get there because they're
yeah,
too slow.
will never
But
get. They'll
yeah,
yeah
so to
destroy
we
themselves.
come. Yeah, exactly. We're coming towards the end. I just wanted to, I guess, kind of recap it a bit. So let's just say, let's go back to our 50 people office furniture company that we talked about a little earlier. So with some sort of a need to attract funding. So where would you go? And where do we go for looking at
Yeah.
what size? Again, this is a well-established company, so it's not the startup. Where do we go
Mm.
to find
So I
somebody where
think
we have the
I
highest chance of being able to leverage our position and story?
yeah I think again. It depends on how much you're raising, what's your ambition, but the sort
Of
of company
course,
you
yeah,
describe, it's established, it's looking for growth. I don't know how much it's raising, but let's say it's raising kind of under 2 million for growth. Then you're probably looking at high net worths. I think VC funds would be looking for a newer, faster growing type of industry
mm,
than the one you describe. But you'd be looking at high net worths, established entrepreneurs, people who have something to bring to the table other than money, that kind of know the space, can open some doors, can advise and guide and kind of move the business quite quickly forward through their connections.
yeah,
I think that's always the best place to start for most businesses. That being said, let's say this 50-person furniture company is already doing 10 million in revenues and is looking to make that 30 million in the next 2 or 3 years, then the right fund might be interested in this,
mm,
providing they can show the potential returns on this are great enough, and
yeah,
they're not getting compared to the returns of a tech company, for example. So as long as you approach the right funds with the right track
yeah,
record of investing in your
yeah,
type of manufacturing business, for example, then again you can approach those. But it's all depends upon the details of what you need. But
of
yeah,
course,
it would
yeah,
be
yeah,
one of
yeah,
those two things.
yeah. Okay. Well, that makes a lot of things. And I just want to thank you here, James. Really, it's been really interesting to hear. And I think also for me, gain some more clarity on the steps and a pretty straightforward plan, not necessarily straightforward in execution, I'm guessing, but at least clear in mind what you need to have in place to be able to go out. And then, as you say here towards the end, that it's probably aiming for some of the younger and smaller players in this game, because the bigger institutional ones are not there yet, and they're not able to take in or and give as much credit and interest to your story, your narrative, your positive impact as the other and smaller and new coming players are.
Yeah.
So I think that alone will be a clear message for people for where to go.
Yeah, and look, don't rule out those big firms, but just expect a different type of engagement with them. It's all on the table, but you're just going to expect different results and different conversations with those types of funds, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So if somebody who is listening thinks, this is really interesting, I need more, where do they connect best with you?
Yeah. So if they go to pitchready.co.uk, they'll be able to take a scorecard on how investor ready they are, benchmark themselves in terms of their own investment readiness, and then get a free copy of my book, Investable Entrepreneur, as a gift. So anyone of your listeners that wants to do that, they can do so. If they want to hear more from me, they can connect with me on LinkedIn. If you just search James Church on LinkedIn, I should pop up. So yeah, that's probably the best place to connect with me. But in terms of engaging and maybe taking the next step on your investment journey, pitchready.co.uk would be the place to go to get a load of goodies and resources.
Amazing. I love that you put it all out there for people to start on their own, and then if and when they feel ready, they can reach out to you if they need more assistance. So that's really great. Yeah, perfect. So James, thank you so much for being on the show today and sharing all of your knowledgeable insight and learnings over the years and models. It's been a true pleasure. And for you people out there listening, thank you for tuning in. And if you like it, please hit subscribe here. And if you know somebody, just one person that you think they might need this, please share this episode so we can get it out to a wider audience of people. So with that said, thank you, James, and thank you all for listening in.